My name is Linda, and for 8 blissful years, I was deeply convinced that I had struck gold in the marital lottery. You know those couples who just seem to have it all figured out, as if they are living a dream? That was us, or at least I thought it was. I met Jack in college. He was charming, intelligent, and incredibly affectionate. What struck me most about him was his attentiveness. He listened like no one else did. When he asked me out, I was elated. Our first date was a simple dinner at a local Italian restaurant, but the conversation flowed like vintage wine. "I can't believe we're only just going on a date," Jack said, smiling across the candle. "Lit table. I've been in your calculus class for a whole semester, and it took me this long to ask you out." I giggled. Well, better late than never, right? That was the first of countless magical moments. Our relationship blossomed rapidly, much like a sunflower in the full embrace of summer. We were that couple, the ones who finish each other's sentences, the ones who make people roll their eyes in disbelief at their overt happiness. 3 years into our relationship, we tied the knot. It was a small but elegant ceremony, attended by family and close friends. My parents, Susan and Mark, were elated. Jack had already won them over with his kindness and unwavering respect. "You picked a good one," my dad whispered in my ear as he walked me down the aisle. Little did he know how those words would later come back to haunt us. The years that followed were like a dream. We traveled, we laughed, and we built a life together. We supported each other's careers. I was climbing the corporate ladder in marketing while Jack excelled as an architect. Our personalities meshed well. He was the yin to my yang. What made things even more delightful was the relationship Jack had with my parents. On weekends, we'd often invite them for dinner, and he would spend hours talking to my dad about everything from politics to sports. "Mark, have you seen the latest model of electric cars? They're promising 400 miles on a single charge." Jack would excitedly bring up topics he knew my dad enjoyed. "Oh, really? That's fascinating. You must tell me more, son," my dad would reply, equally engaged. And my mother adored him, too. She and Jack would often share cooking tips, and he never missed a chance to compliment her on her apple pie. "Susan, you've got to teach me how to make this. It's divine," Jack would say, savoring each bite. My mom would blush. "Anytime, Jack. You're always welcome in my kitchen." Our 8th anniversary was on the horizon, and everything seemed perfect. But as they say, appearances can be deceptive, and life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. At that point, if someone had told me what was about to unfold, that the man I loved and trusted would jeopardize not just our love, but also the trust of my family, I would have laughed it off as a cruel joke. But as I would soon find out, reality can be far stranger than fiction and far more painful than any joke. It was as if we were characters in a play, blissfully unaware that the script was about to take a dark and twisted turn, changing our lives forever. The year that followed our 7th anniversary was nothing short of spectacular. At work, I received a promotion that I had been eyeing for months. The new role came with not just a significant bump in salary, but also the kind of responsibilities that I had always dreamt of. Jack was ecstatic when I broke the news. "Babe, this is amazing. You've worked so hard for this," he exclaimed, pulling me into a tight hug. "I know, right? I can't believe it," I replied, my voice tinged with excitement and a little bit of disbelief. We decided to celebrate with a night out. Dinner at an upscale restaurant, followed by a moonlit stroll along the riverbank. It felt like we were floating, each step lifting us higher into a world where dreams come true. But my promotion wasn't the only windfall that year. A few weeks later, Jack received news that his parents had left him a significant inheritance. It was an extensive estate, acres of rolling countryside, with a large, elegantly designed home at its center, along with a considerable sum of money. Even though the inheritance came due to the sad event of his parents' passing, it felt like they had left him their blessings. He sat me down to talk about it one evening. "Linda, this is life, changing. We could do so much with this," he said, his eyes glowing. I smiled, holding his hand. I know, Jack. It's like the universe is giving us a sign, telling us it's our time to shine. Together, we began to plan our future anew. The financial freedom offered us the opportunity to invest, travel, and indulge in some luxuries we'd only imagined. For a while, it felt like we were living a fairy tale, as if the universe had finally decided to reward us for all the years of hard work and love we'd put into our relationship. Soon, our combined good fortunes led to substantial financial security. We were saving and investing wisely, and within months, our net worth had soared to a point where I felt we could make some truly impactful decisions. It was around this time that the idea of buying a house for my parents began to take root in my mind. With the combined money from my new job and Jack's inheritance, I realized that I had enough to make this dream a reality. We hit the milestone of saving $1 million, and that's when I knew it was time to give back to the two people who had given me so much throughout my life, my parents. One evening, as Jack and I were sitting on our patio, sipping on some red wine, I broached the subject. Jack, I've been thinking, we're incredibly blessed, you know. I think it's time to share that blessing. I want to buy a house for my parents. Jack looked at me and smiled. I think that's a wonderful idea, Linda. It's so like you to think of giving back when you've been blessed. We clinked our glasses, sealing the commitment to this new plan. It felt incredible to be in a position to provide for my parents, to offer them the kind of comfort and security they'd given me all these years. And so, the search began for the perfect house. Unbeknownst to me, another search was also underway. A search that would lead us down a path I never thought possible. But that's a chapter for another time. Little did I know that this act of generosity, meant to bring happiness and security, would unravel the tapestry of trust and love that I thought was unbreakable. Life was about to teach me a harsh lesson, one that would leave scars so deep they might never fully heal. Only a few months after we had settled my parents into their new home, a modern but cozy bungalow with a beautiful garden, I had to go on a business trip. The promotion I had received earlier meant more responsibility, including travel. I was away for a week, working in a different city. It was the longest time I had spent away from Jack, and I missed him terribly. During the week, Jack and I would text, share pictures, and call each other when we could. He'd say how much he missed me, how the house felt empty without my presence. I felt the same way, counting the days until I could return. Only a couple more days, babe. Then I'll be home, I told him over the phone. Can't come soon enough, he replied, his voice tinged with melancholy. While I was away, Jack took it upon himself to make a surprise visit to my parents. On the surface, it seemed like a thoughtful gesture. Jack had never been anything but kind and respectful to them, and he knew how much their comfort meant to me. My parents were always welcoming towards him, treating him like the son they never had. So when he showed up at their doorstep that afternoon with a smile and a sheaf of papers in his hand, they had no reason to suspect anything. Hey, Mark. Susan. I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd drop by. Jack greeted my parents as they opened the door. I also have some paperwork here that Linda and I need you to take a look at. Just some routine stuff for the house. My dad, always the cautious one, replied. Well, it's great to see you, Jack. But you know, these things take time to read through. How about we go over them and signed tomorrow? Jack's eyes narrowed for just a second, but he quickly masked it with his usual friendly demeanor. Sure, that sounds fair. Take your time and go through the details. As soon as Jack left, my parents felt a nagging sense of unease. He had always been open and straightforward, so the impromptu visit and routine paperwork seemed odd. My mother's intuition kicked in first. Mark, something doesn't feel right, she told my dad. We should read these papers carefully. And read they did. When they discovered that the documents were designed to transfer ownership of their home to Jack, they were flabbergasted. The house that was meant to be their peaceful sanctuary in their golden years had almost turned into a trap, and the person setting it was none other than their own son-in-law. The feeling of betrayal was immediate and sharp. This can't be real. my dad muttered in disbelief, his eyes scanning over the legal jargon once again. Should we call Linda? My mom suggested, her voice tinged with worry. They decided to contact me right away. As I picked up their frantic call, oblivious to the treachery that had just unfolded, I could never have predicted how drastically life was about to change. My perfect marriage was not so perfect, after all. It was a facade hiding deceit and betrayal of the worst kind. My parents informed me about Jack's sudden visit and the papers he wanted them to sign. As I listened to their account, my hands began to shake. I felt a chilling mix of shock, betrayal, and confusion. The love story I had been living was turning into a dark tale, and it was time for drastic measures. The moment I hung up the phone with my parents, my mind began to race. Anger and disbelief clouded my judgment for a moment, but I knew I had to act quickly and smartly. My parents had always taught me that in moments of crisis, it's crucial to think clearly, and it seemed like all those lessons were preparing me for this. I needed professional advice. I called Robert, a notary and a family friend who had always been our go. Two for legal matters. I hastily explained the situation, my voice trembling as I recounted the betrayal I could barely comprehend. I can't believe he'd do something like this, Robert. What should I do? I asked, trying to hold back tears. Linda, first of all, take a deep breath. People do strange and terrible things for money. Sadly, it's a tale as old as time. What you need to do is protect yourself and your parents. Robert's voice was calm, soothing even, offering a much-needed anchor. I think I have a plan, he continued. You mentioned your parents haven't signed anything yet, which is good. How about we draft a new set of papers reversing what Jack attempted to do? You mean a deed where, if signed, Jack would transfer his property to my parents? I asked. Exactly, Robert confirmed. The next day, while I was still away, Robert visited my parents. Armed with a new set of papers that would turn the tables on Jack, they prepared for his return. The new deed was designed so that if Jack signed it, he would effectively transfer all his assets, including his share of our combined property and his inheritance, to my parents. The day arrived. My parents had texted me early that morning. He said he's coming today to pick up the papers. My heart was pounding as I waited for an update, feeling helpless being so far away. Finally, the message came. He's here. Sitting on the edge of my hotel room bed, phone in hand, I awaited the results of this high-stakes gamble. Minutes felt like hours. Then another message from my parents. He signed it, and he laughed. I read those words, and a cold fury washed over me. He laughed. The audacity of the man to not only deceive the family he had pledged to love and honor, but to laugh while doing it. My father called me soon after. Linda, he signed the papers and left, laughing and telling us to get out of his house. He had no clue what he actually signed. Thank you, Dad. I can't believe it has come to this. Please make sure to store those papers in a safe place. I'm coming home tomorrow and we need to take the next steps, I said, my voice resolute. The plan had worked, but the victory felt hollow. As I packed my bags to return home, I felt like I was stepping into a new phase of my life, one that no longer included the man I had once loved so deeply. I knew what had to be done next. And while it pained me to even think it, I knew that this marriage was over. The moment I landed back home, the gravity of what had transpired weighed heavy on my shoulders. I went straight to my parents' house, where they welcomed me with a somber embrace. We sat down, the atmosphere thick with a mixture of relief, betrayal, and the kind of familial closeness that often emerges from shared adversity. Mom, Dad, I can't apologize enough for what you've been put through, I began, my eyes moist with unshed tears. Linda, don't. This isn't your fault. We're just glad we caught it in time, my father reassured me, his hand gripping mine. With the signed documents safely stored away, I knew it was time to confront Jack. I called him, my heart pounding in my chest as I heard the phone ring. Then his voice. Linda, you're back. I missed you so much, babe, he said, the warmth in his voice at stark odds with the cold reality of his actions. Jack, we need to talk. It's important. Meet me at home, I replied, keeping my voice steady. Sure, everything okay? He asked, a hint of concern creeping into his tone. We'll talk at home, I repeated, and hung up. When I arrived at our house, a house that symbolized years of togetherness, love, and shared dreams, I felt a pang of sorrow. That sorrow quickly turned into resolve as I remembered what was at stake: justice, self-respect, and the well-being of my family. Jack was already there when I walked in. The look on his face changed from relief to puzzlement as he saw my expression. "What's wrong?" he asked, feigning innocence. I took a deep breath, then pulled out the documents he had signed. "What's wrong, Jack? You tell me, do you recognize these?" I slid the papers across the table towards him. For a second, he looked confused, but as he skimmed through the documents, his face went pale. "What is this? This isn't what I gave to your parents." "No, it's not, because my parents aren't fools, and neither am I snapped back. "You tried to con my parents out of their home, Jack. Did you really think you could betray us like that and get away with it?" Jack looked like he had been slapped. "Linda, No, you can't. Nothing can justify what you tried to do," I cut him off, feeling a surge of both triumph and sadness. Just then, the doorbell rang. My parents had arrived, accompanied by 2 police officers. We presented the signed documents, and Jack's face crumpled as he finally understood the gravity of his mistake. "You're required to vacate the premises immediately, sir," one officer stated after confirming the legal change of property ownership. Jack looked devastated, his eyes filling with tears. "I'm so sorry, Linda," he whispered as the police escorted him out of what was no longer his home. "Your apologies mean nothing if they come after betrayal," I replied, coldly. It was a painful victory. As I watched him walk away, I felt like a chapter of my life had ended in the most heart-wrenching way possible. But this was a necessary end, a reckoning that had to happen for justice to be served and for me to move forward even if that meant walking alone. The days that followed were filled with a whirlwind of emotions and legal proceedings. Given what had happened, the divorce was relatively straightforward. Jack didn't contest it, probably realizing that he had no moral or legal ground to stand on. Nevertheless, the emptiness I felt was overwhelming. I couldn't wrap my head around how someone I had spent almost a decade with could betray me and my family in such a devastating way. "Are you sure you're okay with this, Linda?" Robert, the notary, asked me as we reviewed the final divorce papers in his office. "I have to be, don't I?" I sighed, gripping the pen. "It's just paperwork now, a formality. The marriage was over the moment he tried to con my parents." "You've got a strong spirit, Linda," Robert assured me. "You'll get through this and you'll be better for it." With a heavy heart, I signed the papers, marking the end of a chapter and the beginning of an uncertain future. We divided no property, for Jack had already transferred his assets, albeit unintentionally, to my parents. The irony wasn't lost on me. The last encounter I had with Jack was brief. We met at a coffee shop to exchange a few remaining personal belongings. I couldn't bring myself to meet him at what was once our home. He looked ragged, a shadow of the man I thought I had known. "Linda, can we talk?" he asked, his voice tinged with a desperation I couldn't empathize with anymore. "We are talking, aren't we?" I said, handing him a small box containing some of his personal items. "I messed up, okay? I don't know what I was thinking. The money, the opportunity, it got to me. But can't we try to work things out?" he stammered. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw nothing of the man I had fallen in love with. "Work things out? Jack, you didn't just mess up. You plotted to deceive and hurt the people who should have been able to trust you the most. You and I are beyond working things out." "I'm sorry, Linda. I really am," he said, tears in his eyes. "Sorry doesn't undo betrayal, Jack." I replied. "You made your choice, and now you have to live with the consequences. So do I." And with that, I walked away. There was nothing more to say, no closure that would magically heal the wounds of deceit and betrayal. It was over, and the finality of it was both freeing and heartbreaking. In the days that followed, I found solace in the embrace of my family, the very people Jack had tried to wrong. Together we navigated through the aftermath, reaffirming our bonds and our trust in one another. My parents decided to sell the house and use the proceeds to travel, a dream they had long put off. As for me, I decided to focus on my career and myself, rediscovering the person I was before my life became entangled with Jack's.